The field was quiet, too quiet for a place that once echoed with galloping hooves and laughter. Grass grew long over forgotten trails, and the once white fencing had chipped and rotted in the corners. At first glance, it looked like an empty property, just another plot of land, surrendered to time. But in the farthest corner, just beyond a half-collapsed barn, and hidden by shadows of neglect, lay the form of an emaciated horse, not moving, not calling, just existing, barely, in the hollow space between survival and surrender. The rescue call came in on a chilly morning. A neighbor had seen something, a flicker of movement in the tall grass. No one had lived on the property for months, maybe longer. The original owners had vanished after losing everything. The animals, everyone assumed, had been taken with them. But that assumption was wrong. A single horse had been left behind, tied loosely to a rotting post that had broken free long ago, with no food, no water, and no human contact. The horse had stayed in the same small area, waiting through storms, through frost, through the unbearable heat of summer and the bitter grip of winter. This horse had simply refused to give up. When rescuers arrived, they were not prepared for what they saw. Bones jutted through a patchy coat that once must have shone in the sun. The eyes of the horse were hollow, yet somehow still watching. One leg was bent unnaturally beneath the body, and every rib was visible beneath the skin. The silence of the scene was almost unbearable. No neighs, no panic, just stillness. It was the lead rescuer who first approached, crouching low, whispering softly. There was no fear in the horse, just confusion and a flicker of recognition. A soft snort escaped from dry nostrils, as if the animal couldn't quite believe anyone had come. The rescuers named the horse Grace, not for religious reasons, but because every breath this animal took was an act of grace against impossible odds. With gentle movements, blankets were wrapped around Grace's frail form. Water was offered slowly, in small increments, as dehydration had settled deep into the bones. There was no rushing the process. Every moment was fragile. The journey back to the sanctuary was slow. Grace was lifted, using a specially designed sling, with the support of 6 team members. The truck ride was filled with constant monitoring. Every few minutes, someone would check for breathing, for blinking, for life. Because when an animal has been on the edge for so long, even the smallest change can tip the balance. But Grace held on, inch by inch, mile by mile. Survival remained the choice. At the sanctuary, an isolated padded stall was prepared. Warmth radiated from heating lamps, and soft hay lined the floor. For the first few days, Grace couldn't stand, but the eyes moved. They watched every caretaker with a look that said, "I am still here." It was haunting, powerful, and unforgettable. Meals were hand-fed, starting with watery oatmeal mixtures, and gradually shifting to small bits of alfalfa and apples. The medical team worked around the clock, treating pressure sores, cracked hooves, and signs of infection. Blood work revealed a weakened immune system, but no irreparable organ damage. Hope began to rise. Week 1 passed. Grace stood for the first time with support. The room erupted into cheers and tears. It lasted only a few seconds, but it was more than enough. It was proof that strength remained buried under trauma. As rehabilitation progressed, therapy sessions began. A volunteer named Rosa spent hours brushing Grace's coat, untangling matted clumps with patient fingers. Soft music played from a nearby speaker, and Grace would often close those tired eyes, as if to rest in safety for the first time. By week 3, the horse could walk, carefully, each step measured and supported, but with undeniable purpose. The transformation was not rapid, but it was constant. From a silent shell in the grass to a majestic creature rediscovering movement, Grace was returning. Not just physically, but emotionally. There were moments when the horse would nuzzle into a caretaker's chest, holding still, as if soaking in the presence of kindness. The story of Grace spread across social media. People from around the world followed the updates with bated breath. Donations poured in. Handwritten letters arrived. One child from Maine sent a drawing of a horse with wings, titled, "Never Give Up." That picture was pinned to Grace's stall door. As the months unfolded, Grace gained weight. The eyes grew brighter, the coat thickened and began to gleam. But more than the physical change, it was the lightness in movement, the curiosity in gestures, that revealed the most healing. The horse who once lay dying in a forgotten field now ran in a pasture of green, tail flying in the wind, hooves pounding the earth with power. And every time the pasture gate opened, Grace would walk toward the staff. Not away. No more fear, no more hiding, just trust. Then came the moment everyone had waited for, the adoption visit. A retired equine therapist named Margaret had been following Grace's journey since day one. With a quiet home in the countryside and 2 older horses needing gentle company, Margaret knew it was time. The first meeting was emotional. Grace walked up to the woman and stood still, eyes level. Margaret reached out slowly, and Grace leaned forward, not out of hesitation, but recognition. It was the perfect match. 2 weeks later, Grace left the sanctuary, not in an emergency truck, but in a specially outfitted trailer with flowers tied to the side. Volunteers waved, some with tears, some with smiles. The story had come full circle, from abandonment to belonging. At Margaret's farm, Grace found not just peace, but purpose. Therapy sessions began again, not for Grace, but with Grace. Children with anxiety, veterans with PTSD, and people navigating loss came to spend time with the once broken horse. Grace would listen, stand still, nuzzle gently when the tears came. It was as if the trauma that had nearly ended Grace's life had also taught the value of stillness and empathy. One spring evening, Margaret hosted a small gathering to celebrate 1 year since the rescue. Grace stood proudly in the middle of the field, grazing quietly. A sign was posted on the fence that read, "Grace lives here. Grace wins." And no truer words had ever been spoken. This is not just the story of a horse. It is the story of resilience, of what happens when someone refuses to look away, of how even when the world forgets, healing is still possible. Grace was abandoned and left to die, but now Grace lives to inspire